Hello and welcome to Color with Kendi. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through the Messy Watercolor Brush Set for Procreate. Today's video is part 3 of the series, and we're going to be tackling the Messy Extras brush set. If you haven't yet purchased the pack and you want to find out more, you can find a link in the description as well as the pinned comment. Let's begin. Okay, so with the Messy Watercolor Brush Set, you get a bunch of different files. You get a reference file, 2 canvases of different sizes, and a brush tutorial canvas. And that's what we will be working on today. So let's open that up. And if you watch parts 1 and 2, we discussed the Messy Watercolor Brush Set, the main brush set. There are a lot of brushes and we discussed all of them in part 1 and part 2. Today is part 3, so we are focusing on the Messy Extras brush set. So make sure you have imported that and you have the brush tutorial canvas ready. And let's go to the layers panel. So this was from last time. We had talked about the dry detail brush in part 2, so I'm going to turn that off. And then I'm going to go to Messy Extras 1 and turn that on. And I would suggest that you watch part 1 and 2 first, because I do talk about the shape makers and clipping masks, and I'm not going to be discussing that in detail today. So I am going to breeze through this a little bit because I have talked about those at length in parts 1 and 2. So what I have here is a bunch of different shapes that I've already made for you, and they have a watercolor texture on them, and we're going to start to add even more interesting effects using the brushes in the Messy Watercolor Extras set. So let's go to the brush library first, and we have a Messy Smudger. It says for smudge tool. So this is meant to be used with the smudge tool. So what we're going to do is we've selected the brush here. To select the same brush as a smudger, just go to this smudge icon, press and hold, and now you'll be able to smudge with that. But before we smudge, we need something to smudge. So let's do that first. Let's go back to the brush library, and I am going to select another brush. Let's just select this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some pigment in the clipping mask. I don't want to add pigment in this layer. I want to do this in another layer. And then I'm going to add a clipping mask, and we're going to paint here. How does the clipping mask work? Basically, anything that you paint in your clipping mask layer will show up on the shapes underneath. So we already have some shapes here, and let's just add some pigment with any brush of your choice, and then we're going to work with the smudger. So now let's go back to the smudge tool, and we're on the Messy Smudger. And now let's talk about how this works. So with the smudger, all you need to do is start to smudge outwards. And you can change the size and it will make a big difference. So I'm going to go a little bit smaller because we're working with a smaller area. So you start with any area of pigment that you want and you just smudge outwards. It's a bit different than the other smudgers from the main set, and it's far more watery. And if you keep moving your brush, it feels like it's moving the pigment with a little bit of water. So you can create interesting effects with this smudger. And I would suggest starting off with a point where there's pigment and then work your way out. If you start smudging from the outside in, what will happen is it's almost like water is moving into your shape. Do you see what's happening here? It's like water is moving into the shape. So you can create very interesting effects with the smudger. It's a little bit different from the smudgers in the main set. So if you remember from part 1 and 2, the Messy Watercolor set has 2 smudgers right here, smudger A and B. As you can see, they look a little bit different from the Messy Smudger. This one is far more watery, and it is really great for smudging things out in a more dilute way. All right, so now let's move on and talk about the dual color stamp and flow A brush. We don't need to smudge anymore, so let's go back to the main brush library. And then let's tap on Messy Extras and have the dual color Stamp and Flow A selected. So we're going to work with this shape here. Okay, so this is a dual color brush, so we need to select 2 colors. Any 2 colors of your choice, go to the color menu, and then you have 2 colors here. I'm going to select red, and then maybe black. So those are my 2 colors. And this will be my main color. Whatever color is here will end up being your main color. Now, if I use light pressure, I'm seeing quite a bit of the black. And if I use heavy pressure, I'm seeing more of the red. So this brush, you can vary the pressure and you'll get different results. And why it's a stamp and flow brush is if you want to use it as a stamp, just like this, you can. So it's like a drop of pigment that's moved outwards, or you can stamp it and then move your brush and you will get something that's much larger in size. So let me show you that again. If I use a very soft tap, you get a very small stamp, and tap and move outwards, then you will get a much larger stamp. So that's why it's stamp and flow. And what I would suggest when you use this brush, you can also just keep moving your brush on the screen and you will create different effects that way too. And you can keep moving your brush on the screen and varying the pressure, and you will create interesting looks. One thing to remember with the stamp and flow brushes, or any of the brushes in the Messy Extra set, is when you are applying the pigment on the screen, try to keep moving your pencil, because if you stop moving your pencil and you just stay in one place, this is gonna happen. This is really weird. This is because when you hold your pencil after you have made a line or you've applied some pigment, you are invoking what is called quick shape in Procreate. It's one of Procreate's functions. And while this is pretty cool, sometimes it creates really unintended results. And you can see here, it says edit polyline. That means we have invoked quick shape. And sometimes beyond the unintended results, it might just freeze. So now if I try to do something, it's okay, but sometimes it will freeze. So I would suggest that if you are applying pigment, keep moving. Keep moving your pencil so you don't invoke quick shape. So that is the stamp and flow brush. So stamp, and then you can also move it. All right, so that is that brush. So now let's talk about stamp and flow B. So I am going to use the same colors and same concept. If you stamp, that's what it looks like. Do you see it's a little bit softer than this one? Like it looks like it's bleeding out a bit more. And if I stamp and move my brush, it will become bigger. So very similar to this brush, but different, I guess, effects. The edges are different. And this is a little bit more intense in terms of the pigment. So you can use this in whichever way you want. If you just want to stamp with it, go ahead. Or if you want to use light pressure and just apply some interesting pigment, you can do that too. All right, so now let's move on to the next section. We're going to turn these two off and turn on Messy Extras 2 and turn that layer on. And we are going to talk about the dual color Stamp and Flow C and Stamp and Flow D brushes. And I'm going to use the same black color, but let's change this color to, let's say, maybe an intense bluish green. Let's see how that turns out. Let's select the black again, tap on it, because I want that to be my main color. So I'm going to select Stamp and Flow C, and let's just make sure I create a clipping mask first. So tap on plus, create a new layer, and make it a clipping mask. And then let's start to use this brush. So if you stamp, that's what it looks like. If you stamp and then move your brush, that's what it looks like. And if you use light pressure, you can create this kind of a look. With light pressure, you'll see more of this main color. I'm going to do the same thing here, light pressure, and then I'm going to go to heavy pressure. Then you'll start to see more of the second color that we have here. So you can use this brush with any colors that you like, and it can create very interesting effects. And now let's talk about Stamp and Flow D. Similar concept. If you stamp it once, you get something like that. A little bit different from the other stamps. And then if you stamp and then move your pencil, it becomes bigger. You have to try this out because it's hard for me to explain what happens. So when you use this on the screen, you'll see what I'm talking about. And then if you use light pressure, you create something like this. It's like little blobs almost. And then if you use heavy pressure, it's like that. So you can create a variety of different looks with these two brushes. And as I mentioned earlier, when you are using them, try to keep moving your pencil on the screen and not holding it, because that will invoke quick shape. And sometimes it might cause your Procreate app to freeze. So try to avoid that. Okay, so let's go to the layers panel and turn these two off and go to Messy Extras 3 and turn that on. We already have shapes available for you here, and we're going to use a clipping mask to try out these brushes. So go to the layers panel, tap on plus, and then make this a clipping mask. So anything we do in this layer will show up on the shapes underneath. And for this, let's see, should I change the colors? Nah, I can use the same colors that I have. And I'm going to do the stamp and slide. So if you stamp, that's what it looks like. And you may want to smudge any hard edges, so you can just use the smudger and smudge that out if you'd like. Or you can stamp it and then move it like that, and you will get an interesting effect. Also, you can reduce the size a little bit and then stamp it like that. And then if you want to smudge it out, you can smudge it out a bit. Or instead of that, if you don't want to smudge it out, you can just stamp it, oops, I'm on the brush library, I was on the smudger. Stamp it and slide it, and then it will cover the entire shape for you. And as I mentioned, when you are stamping and sliding, try to avoid keeping your pencil held. Every time you use this, you will get slightly different results. So it's kind of fun to use. There we go. And it's quite big, so it might affect some of the other layers. So I'm just gonna erase this here. I'm gonna go back to the brush library and tap on Stamp and Slide B. Same concept, you stamp it, you move it. Just don't hold the pencil and invoke quick shape. So I'm going to do the same thing here, stamp it. I'm going to stamp and slide. You get a slightly different texture. And as I mentioned, you can always smudge out the edges if you'd like. Then we have Stamp and Slide C in the brush library. Let's see, I stamp it, stamp and slide. So very different. And you can layer it, you can keep going. So that's what that looks like. So they all have slightly different effects, and depending on the colors that you choose, they will look different. And I did not mention, but these are not dual color brushes. They are single color brushes. So let's move on to the layers panel. Let's turn these two layers off and go to Messy Extras 4 and turn that layer on. We have 4 brushes to talk about here, and then we will be done with this set. So this is the Grungy brushes and the Spotty brushes. So let's use the same color, black. It's probably the best for you to see the differences. And let's tap on Grungy, stamp and slide. Same concept, not any different. Stamp. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. I have to create a clipping mask. I always forget to do this. Clipping mask, add another layer, and then tap on it, clipping mask. And then we can start to do our stamping. So stamp, that's what that looks like. Stamp and slide, that's what that looks like. And you can change the size, of course, and every time you do this, let's try that again, stamp and slide, it will look a bit different. So that's kind of the fun with these brushes. It will look different every time, and definitely you can smudge out some areas too if you like. All right, so now let's go back to the brush library. Grungy, stamp and slide B. Same concept, stamp it, and you can do this multiple times, or you can stamp and slide and it will look like that. Let's try that again. A little bit different this time. So these two have slightly different effects. This is a little less intense than this one. Now let's tap on Spotty, stamp and slide. And let's zoom in here. If I tap it once, it's like that, and I can tap it multiple times. So this is really good for creating interesting effects that are more textural. And you don't have to stamp in the center of your shape. You can also stamp outside of your shape. And I can stamp it here and then move inwards. That's what that would look like. Undo, undo. Let's try that again. I stamp in the center. That's what it looks like. I generally like to stamp from the outside of the shape and then move my way in. And as I mentioned with the other brushes in this particular set, this Messy Extras, don't hold the pencil after you've done something because you don't want to invoke quick shape. All right, let's move on to the final brush, Spotty, Stamp and Slide B. So if you stamp it once, that's what it looks like. You stamp it again. And depending on how much pressure you apply, it will look a little bit different. So if I apply very light pressure, it looks like that. But with heavy pressure, let me try that again. Heavy pressure, it's a little bit bigger. Slight difference, not too much. So let's try that again. Light pressure, heavy pressure. Do you see the difference now? Now you can do the same thing here where you stamp outside and then we slide. We keep the pencil on the screen, stamp and slide. Or you can just move around like this. You can keep stamping. So it can create really interesting effects. So that's pretty much it for the Messy Extras set. We've discussed all of the brushes in this set. The main thing to remember is that whenever you're using these brushes, use them in a clipping mask on an existing shape. Ideally, a shape that you've made with the Shape Maker tool because those are opaque and you will see the effects more clearly. And also, you can use the Messy Smudger if you'd like with the smudge tool to create a watery smudge effect. And with any of these brushes, try to keep moving the brush on the screen so you don't invoke quick shape. I think that's the main thing to remember here. And yeah, that covers the brush set in its entirety. We have talked a lot about all of the brushes, and I hope this served as a good starting point, part 1, 2, and 3 of this video series. And there's definitely lots more to learn, but I can't fit everything in this video series. I'll try to create more tutorials, art tutorials, actually using these brushes to make art, and then things will come to life. There's one thing to understand how the brushes work, but it's a totally different ballgame when you start to utilize these in your artwork. So we will definitely talk about that in the upcoming months. So if you are interested in getting this brush set and you don't already have it, you can find a link in the description as well as a pinned comment. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye!